Go ahead and turn to Psalm 37, and we're down to verse 13 now. Psalm 37 and verse 13. It says, "The Lord shall laugh at him, for he seeth that his day is coming." This is the one of 4 places in the Bible where it talks about the Lord laughing. There's only 4 places, and I'm going to read you the other 3 places. The first one is in Psalm 2 and verse 4. The Lord does have a sense of humor, we see, but this is a different type of laughter. This is not laughing at a joke or when somebody slips on the ice or something. And this is laughing in derision. This is like whenever you would look at somebody and laugh at them to mock them. This is what the Lord's doing here. Psalm 2 and verse 4, it says, "He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision." And I love the Bible because it just defined what I was saying there. It tells you what it is for the Lord to laugh. He has them in derision. So he's holding them in contempt. The next place is in Psalm 59 and verse 8. Psalm 59 and verse 8. It says, "But thou, O Lord, shalt laugh at them. Thou shalt have all the heathen in derision." So people, they like to laugh at God, right? And you've probably met people like that. And when you tell them that you believe that God created the universe in 6 days or something, and they laugh and they make fun of you. Like, oh, you think there's some, giant spaghetti monster in the sky that just can poof and all this stuff happens or something. And they want to make fun of you. Well, God's going to get the last laugh because they laugh now, he'll laugh later. Proverbs 1 and verse 26. Proverbs 1 and verse 26. It says, "I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your fear cometh." So there we see that laughing and mocking, in this sense, laughing is mocking. And this is after God has commanded people to get wisdom and to obey his voice and turn at his reproof. And when they don't, and they set it not at his counsel, and they don't want to hear it, and then he says, once you've done that, then I'm going to laugh. Whenever your calamity comes, whenever your fear comes, whenever the bad things happen to you, then God's just going to laugh. He's going to say, "Ha ha, you thought you were going to disobey me? Now I get the last laugh." It says there in this verse that we're looking at, "The Lord shall laugh at him, for he seeth that his day is coming." So the Lord laughs at the wicked because his day is coming. That is, the wicked's day is coming. Now, of course, the day of the Lord's coming too, and the day of the Lord is going to be the wicked's day also, because the wicked's going to get theirs in that day. But his day is the day that the wicked shall be judged. And there's a couple places in the Bible here that would show us this. In 1 Samuel 26 and verse 10, you could say this is payday. This is whenever you ever hear somebody say you're going to get what's coming to you? This is his day. This is whenever the Lord's going to have a reckoning, and he's going to balance out the scales. He's going to right the wrongs, and all those who mocked him are going to get what's coming to him. 1 Samuel 26 and verse 10. David said, "Furthermore, as the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him." He's talking about Saul here. "Or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish." His day shall come. In this case, this is going to be Saul's day that he's going to be killed. David wasn't going to take it into his own hands. And this really goes into what this David is teaching in this psalm. We don't want to fret because of the wicked. We don't want to get angry because of them. And we don't want to retaliate because of them, because their day is coming. And the Lord will take care of them, just like he took care of Saul. David was not going to lift up his hand against the Lord's anointed. And it came. And Saul ended up dying a suicidal death, if you remember, in battle. Look in Job 18, 16 through 21. Job 18, 16 through 21. It says, his roots shall be dried up beneath, and above shall his branch be cut off. His remembrance shall perish from the earth, and he shall have no name in the street. He shall be driven from light into darkness and chased out of the world. He shall neither have son nor nephew among his people, nor any remaining in his dwellings. They that come after him shall be astonished at his day, as they that went before were affrighted. Surely such are the dwellings of the wicked, and this is the place of him that knoweth not God. People are going to be astonished or astonished at his day. When the day comes, when the wicked are judged, it's going to be something to stand back and be shocked. You talk about the military likes to talk about shock and awe. It's going to be shock and awe when the Lord comes back and destroys the wicked and gives them what's coming to them. And all their power and all their pomp is not going to amount to a hill of beans. And all of their pride and all of their rebellion towards God is going to be stomped out at that day. He has appointed a day to judge the wicked. Now, the wicked's day sometimes comes in this life. It comes soon. Sometimes it doesn't. 1 Timothy 5 and verse 24 tells us that sometimes it comes right away. Like, for instance, how about Herod? You remember Herod in Acts, was it Acts chapter 12, I think? And Herod made an oration, and the people said that it's the voice of a God and not a man, and Herod didn't give God the glory, and the Lord took him out right there, and worms ate him up. Right? So sometimes their day, Herod in pride, right, was exalting himself against God, and God took him out right then and there. But sometimes the Lord allows them to go on for a long time. 1 Timothy 5 and verse 24, some men's sins are open beforehand, going before to judgment, and some men they follow after. So, some of them happen quickly, like Ananias and Sapphira. The Lord didn't leave them around for any time. And but some follow after, like Ahab. Remember Ahab? He did feel a bit of contrition. He walked softly, and the Lord said, it's not going to come in your day, but in your son's day. So sometimes God puts off the judgment. But Ahab worked wickedness above many of his equals. So Ahab's judgment came, I'm certain of that. But it didn't come right in this life. Uzzah's judgment came right away. And there's a lot of examples of that. Nadab and Abihu, their judgment came right away. We talked about him last time. He was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. Onan, the Lord killed him. So yeah, lots of people. The Corinthians, they were making a mockery of the Lord's Supper, and it said, for this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep. The Lord took them out too. So sometimes it happens quickly, but sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't happen now, it's definitely going to happen later. In 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 10, it says that we are all going to stand before the judgment seat of God, of Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:10. Remember, the Lord shall laugh at him, for he seeth that his day is coming. 2 Corinthians 5:10. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that every one may receive the things done in his body, whether according to that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. This isn't just, this is all of us, not just the wicked. Every one of us is going to stand before the judgment seat of God. And it's going to be shame in that day, and that's why this is why Paul says, knowing the terror of the Lord, we persuade men. It's best to clean up our acts now so that we don't get judged then. And then Revelation 20:11 through 12, we're familiar with that. Whenever the books are open and all men stand before God and all men are judged out of the books. There's going to be no like, oh, I forgot about that. No, it's written down right here. Every little last thing. Now, the people that are in the book of life, their books are empty, right? But the wicked, their books are quite full, and the Lord's going to judge them for all of those evil works. Now, the day when Jesus comes back is also called his day. That is, Jesus' day. When he comes back on his day, then for the wicked, then that's going to be his day, the wicked's day. So their day is going to be the same. In Luke Luke 17 and verse 24, the second coming of Christ is described as his day. It's called the day of the Lord in another place. It's called the day of God in another place. Luke 17 and verse 24. Jesus said, "For as the lightning that lighteneth out of the one part under heaven shineth unto the other part under heaven, so shall also the Son of Man be in his day." That's going to be at the last day, right? The last day is his day. It's his big day whenever he finally shows up after a long sabbatical of ruling in heaven and not being here on earth. And he's going to come back, and then that's going to be the day for the wicked to finally be judged. Now it tells us in Psalm 37 and verse 12, kind of linking back to what David talked about before, that these wicked here, that the Lord laughs at when he sees their days coming, these are those that plot against the righteous. Psalm 37 and verse 12. Psalm 37 and verse 12. It says, "The wicked plotteth against the just, and gnasheth upon him with his teeth." Oh, that's the verse. I'm sorry, I was thinking this was a verse that was later. This is the verse that we just covered last week. So those that plot against the wicked and gnash upon him with their teeth are the ones that the Lord are going to laugh at, because it says the Lord shall laugh at him, referring to the wicked that plot against the just. These wicked people that plot against the righteous are going to be confounded on that day. If you look in Psalm 35 and verse 4, just back a couple of chapters, it says, "Let them be confounded and put to shame that seek my soul. Let them be turned back and brought to confusion that devise my hurt." So this is the day that's coming for them, is being confounded and confused. Confounded means discomfited, abashed, put to shame, or mental confusion, confused, disordered, etc. So if you think about it, and let me just go to a verse and then I'll say what I was going to say. So this confounding and confusion is what the wicked have for them waiting. And they're going to have an eternity of confusion. And if you just think about what a judgment that would be, you just think about, everybody's been confused before when you're trying to figure out something, you can't understand something. And it's a horrible feeling because you just can't have any mental certitude. You can't figure out what's right, what's wrong, and you don't know what decision to make. You don't know what to do, and it gives you angst and turmoil. This is what the wicked are going to have forever. They're going to be in hell, confused and confounded, and not figuring out what in the world is going on here. This is what they have waiting for them. In Jeremiah 20 and verse 11. Jeremiah 20 and verse 11. I don't really often think about this aspect of the judgment of the wicked, but I was doing this study, and I looked through all the places in the Bible where it talks about the wicked being confounded and confused, and the judgment of God, even in this life, is confusion of face. And you'll find that phrase, confusion of face, numerous times, that when God's people would turn against him, that one of the judgments that he would give to them is confusion. And I got something to say about that in just a second. But in Jeremiah 20 and verse 11, they're going to have everlasting confusion. It says, "But the Lord is with me as a mighty terrible one. Therefore my persecutors shall stumble, and they shall not prevail. They shall be greatly ashamed, for they shall not prosper. Their everlasting confusion shall never be forgotten." Now you think about this. You think about that God's judgment on people is confusion. And is confoundation a word? Being confounded? I don't know if confoundation is or not, but it sounds like it could be a word, and I'm pretty good at making them up. So anyway, I'll just say that it is until I'm proven wrong otherwise. But anyway, so confusion is the judgment of God, right? Now just think about this. Let me just read you a verse, and then a couple verses, and then you tell me if that doesn't bring to mind society today, confusion. Turn back with me to Leviticus 18 and verse 23. Just remember this. God's judgment is confusion. Now let's look at this. Leviticus 18 and verse 23. It says, "Neither shalt thou lie with any beast to defile thyself therewith, neither shall any woman stand before a beast to lie down thereto. It is confusion." Right? This is bestiality. This is some really vile, nasty stuff. And God says this is confusion. Let me give you one more that God says is confusion. Turn over 2 chapters to Leviticus 20 and verse 12. He says, "And if a man lie with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have wrought confusion. Their blood shall be upon them." So these two things, God says, incest and bestiality, are confusion. And you could throw in there sodomy. That's confusion. I mean, it just doesn't even make any sense. The plumbing doesn't fit, the parts don't work right. It's unnatural, right? That's confusion. Think about the society that we live in now. I mean, I would say today is characterized by confusion, right? Sexual confusion, confusion of men and women's roles, gender confusion, right? People can't figure out who's a boy and who's a girl, and why boys should be boys and girls should be girls. It's a confusing time. Political confusion, right? It's just, and you just watch the news and you just try to figure out what in the heck is going on here, and it's confusing. This is the judgment of God. This is what happens to a nation who turns their back on God. God gives them over to confusion of face. It just really hit me like a ton of bricks. I just thought about that. And I had another thought, and it just escaped me. I was trying to pause for a second, and I hate it when that happens. Maybe it'll come back to me. Oh, the things that we think about that are confusing today, like the whole transgender thing, it's just, it seems like it's just bizarre. It seems like it's come out of nowhere, basically. I mean, it's kind of been around for, I don't know how long, 20, 30 years or something like that. But really, just the last, 2-3 years, or less even, where it's really prominent now. And it went from being something that most people would have just totally dismissed as completely ridiculous. Like this idea of somebody wanting to turn themselves into the opposite sex, and a child, if he is confused, and sometimes that happens to kids, they go through a gender identity where sometimes girls think they're boys or boys think they're girls or something. And instead of just saying, no, you're actually a boy, play with boy toys, you'll get over this, just don't, this is, don't try to change yourself or think that you're somebody you're not or whatever. No, instead now, you encourage them to be whatever gender that they want to be. And you have, and I can't remember what this person was and what their position is, but you have people that are now losing their careers because they dared to say publicly that they didn't think it was a good idea to give young children hormone-blocking medication so that they won't naturally turn into the gender that they are. And, I mean, somebody says something like that. Like, I don't think that's a good idea. And this guy is branded as a hater, he's backward, he's crazy, he's whatever, and he's just out of polite society now and loses his job or whatever. I mean, talk about confusion. And you think the transgender stuff's weird. But remember what God said? The two things that he said were confusion, bestiality, and incest. Yep. What do you think's coming next? Yep. It's not going to stop at the transgender stuff. You think that's confusing. Wait until bestiality is socially acceptable, and anybody that would speak against it is considered a hater. It'll happen. I mean, I would almost guarantee it'll happen. There were people that were protesting somewhere, I forget where this was, just very recently, and they actually had protesters out there holding up signs for like, don't hate on something about, it was some slang term for pedophilia or something. Anyway, basically, don't hate on pedophiles is what they were saying. I don't remember the exact thing, but they literally were holding up signs like, don't persecute us pedophiles, or NAMBLA or whatever, stuff like that. I mean, this is what it's coming to today. The Lord has given this country over to utter confusion. It's crazy. And right here it is. It's right here in the Bible. God will plot to do evil against those who plot to do evil against others. Micah 2, 1 through 3. Micah 2, 1 through 3. Woe to them that devise iniquity, and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand. And they covet fields, and take them by violence, and houses, and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. And we talked about this last week. I think I read this verse. But get this, verse 3. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, behold, against this family do I devise an evil. See, they devised evil. God says, I'm going to devise evil against you. Against this family do I devise an evil, for which ye shall not remove your necks, neither shall ye go haughtily, for this time is evil. You devise evil, God says, I'm going to devise an evil, and you're not going to get out of it. Your judgment is going to come. And a great example of this is whenever men plotted to murder the Son of God, and God plotted to destroy them and proceeded to do so, and he laughed at their calamity in Psalm 2, 1 through 9. Which this is, whenever you're feeling helpless or down in the dumps and you're wondering, what's going to be the end of this insane culture that we live in, read Psalm 2, and you'll see that the Lord is ruling and reigning in the midst of it. He sees what's going on, and he's getting a big belly full up there, and eventually judgment's going to come. Psalm 2, 1 through 9. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. And this same type of thing is happening today. What do you think all this rebellion is? All this weird transgender stuff, sodomy stuff, trying to get God out of every facet of society. What is it but casting their bands asunder? They don't want God's bands. Bands are like handcuffs or whatever. They don't want God's restraint on them. They want to get rid of God, and they want to force everybody else to follow along with their wicked designs. Verse 4. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. They tried to cast God's bands from them. They tried to destroy the Lord Jesus Christ. They colluded together with the Gentiles, with the kings of the earth, with the people of Israel. Everybody got together, and they thought they were going to destroy the Lord's anointed, the Lord's Messiah. And the Lord says, yet I've set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. Despite all that, God still set Christ up on his throne. He resurrected him after they killed him, right? So no matter what men do, God's will be done. And that's the comfort that we can have. Yet, I just love that little word yet. If you left out yet, it wouldn't be so profound. But the word yet means despite all that stuff, I've still done what you tried to prevent me from doing, God says. I love it. I will declare the decree. The Lord hath said unto me, thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Jesus Christ is head over all things to the church, right? All things have been put under his feet. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. You see, what's happening today in this country is not God losing control. It's God smashing the thing to pieces. A lot of people look at this and think, how can God be on the throne? Look at all this stuff that's happening. I say, how can you not see that God's on the throne and he's destroying this wicked country? That's right. That's what he's doing. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings, be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him. So when we put our trust in him, we don't have to worry about it. We're not going to be the ones that are dashed to pieces, broken like a potter's vessel. It's going to be the wicked. But we just want to stick fast. We want to hold fast to the faith, and we want to stay on God's side. Don't give up Don't ever cash in your chips and decide that it seems like all hope is lost and we're just all alone out here, and I'm just tired of fighting. I'm just going to give in and just go along to get along. Don't ever do that, because then the Lord is not going to bless you. Okay, let's go to Psalm 37, verse 14. Psalm 37 and verse 14. It says, "The wicked have drawn out the sword and have bent their bow to cast down the poor and needy and to slay such as be of upright conversation." So we see here from this verse that the wicked prey on two types of people. Who are they from that verse?
Poor and needy, and
Yep.
the upright.
That's right. The poor and the righteous. Those are the two groups of people that wicked people prey on, because they're easy targets, for one thing. Poor people are really easy to oppress. They don't have means to resist you.
Right.
And the righteous, even if they did have means to resist you, are not going to stoop to your tactics, right? They're much more concerned about living a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty, and it's a lot easier for the wicked to beat up on them. And plus, us children of God just don't happen to be quite as bright as the wicked, generally speaking. It says that the children of this world are brighter, are wiser in their generation than the children of light. So we're easy targets. The wicked don't generally go after themselves, because snakes don't go after other snakes, right? Snakes go after the mouse or the easy catch, right?
That's why we have all these wonderful programs like Medicaid and food stamps and housing.
That's right.
Poor, because
Yep.
it oppresses them.
It destroys them
Right.
long term.
Yes. They are, and people, they are so confused on that, and they don't get that, where they look at that and think, oh, these are nice, benevolent people from the government trying to help.
Benefactors.
They're not trying to help.
Right.
They are enslaving people. They are, yes, they're oppressing people.
That's
That's
right.
exactly right. And I was going to make that very point. That's an excellent example. You see, the poor, I feel bad for the poor, because they're hated basically by everybody. They're hated by their families, their neighbors, their friends, and the scripture tells us this. Proverbs 14 and verse 20. My grandpa always said, or he said, that money is the short end of life, but everybody needs a little. And he was poor himself. But money's not all what life is about, but it does make life easier, obviously, especially if you can have enough at least to get to the subsistence level. It certainly makes life a little more comfortable. Proverbs 14 and verse 20. It says, "The poor is hated even of his own neighbor, but the rich hath many friends." Isn't that the truth? Most people don't want to be friends with a poor guy, right? Because poor people, they don't have the nice house to have parties at or entertain friends. They don't have the nice car. Who wants to drive around with a guy in a old clunker, rusted out piece of crap, and you're driving around and you're almost embarrassed to be in the car or something. That kind of thing wouldn't bother me. I grew up riding around in cars like that, but it's not the most desirable. I mean, you'd much rather ride around in a nice brand new sports car with your friend, right? The rich hath many friends. So there's what else did I have written down here? The poor don't dress in nice clothes, right? You're walking around in, like the Bible describes, in vile raiment, and they generally, unfortunately, are not as well educated. So they're just not maybe as intellectually interesting to be around. There's just a lot of things that go against the poor, and that people in general, and we shouldn't be some of them. Okay, I'm not saying that this is the right thing to do. This is just a fact of life. This is what happens to the poor. We shouldn't be such. We shouldn't act like that towards them. That's why Jesus said, whenever you make a feast, don't bid your friends to come. Bid the poor, the maimed, right? Bid the people to come that can't repay you. Don't bid your rich friends to come over, because then they're going to have you come over or something like that, right? So.
And they're thought of as not smart, but sometimes they're like, because there's this idea, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? We have that ingrained.
Yeah.
Even if you look at someone like Conrad Gerald, who probably didn't have a whole bunch of money at any particular time.
Right.
I challenge anyone who thinks they're smart
sure.
to go talk to him for 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, right. And I mean, it's a generalization, and it doesn't mean. What I said, well educated, they're not educated, at least in the ways of this world. They're not,
Absolutely.
they don't have the degrees, they don't have that kind of stuff. And a lot of times in truly poor communities, people are not, it's rare to find an autodidact, that had educated himself. Generally speaking, when you go down to the slums of North Minneapolis, you're not going to find well-educated, cultured people, probably, right? You're going to find people that are pretty ignorant, that have been, gone through the public school, probably the worst of the worst public school systems, and didn't learn anything, and their teachers passed them just to get them to the next grade or whatever. So when you're talking about truly poor people like that, they really have a lot going against them. And it's nothing short of the grace of God to get out of that pit. It's possible, but it's difficult. Proverbs 19 and verse 7. But where there's a will, there's a way. And today especially, nobody has any excuse for being ignorant today. You got the internet. For goodness sakes, you can learn pretty much anything you want about anything for free on the internet. There's no excuse for ignorance today. But when you're brought up in a system like that and you don't even know any different, and especially in some of the black communities where to be educated is a slap in the face to your people, right? Like they'll make fun of you if you speak correctly, right? And I'm sure you've heard of this, or maybe even known people like that. When you come out of the hood and then you want to stop using the Ebonics or whatever and start speaking proper English, and they call you an Uncle Tom or whatever, and they don't, you're discouraged from being educated. And then it's extremely hard to get out of that system. Proverbs 19 and verse 7 says, all the brethren of the poor do hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He pursueth them with words, yet they are wanting to him. And that's sad. That's really sad. You think about that. Brethren hate him. His friends go far from him. And he even tries to pursue them. And he tries to be friends with them. And he tries to, hey, let's get together. And they're just kind of blow him off. No, I'd rather hang out with my friend that has a nice car where we can go cruising or whatever. It's sad. But never forget, it's better to be poor and righteous than rich and wicked. There's nothing wrong with being rich, right? There's nothing wrong with being poor. And there is something wrong with being wicked, right? So whether you're poor or rich, it doesn't matter. To be righteous is the way to be. But if you had to pick between poor and righteous and rich and wicked, of course, we would all want to pick, I would hope, poor and righteous. Proverbs 28 and verse 6. Better is the poor that walketh in his uprightness than he that is perverse in his ways, though he be rich. So if you're poor, at least have integrity and honesty, and you can go to sleep at night knowing that you were honest. It's kind of like this little side business that I'm doing, and I've made it a point that I'm going to be honest in it. And I'm not going to use fake sales, false scarcity. I'm not going to use the other tactics that other people use. And it may make it so it's not even successful because of that. And I'm not going to screw my customers. And if I get returns that end up costing me money, I'm going to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. And I'm going to run an honest business. And if it fails because of that, at least I can lay my head down at night and I can say, I did an honest business and be happy with that, even if it's not successful. Whereas if I was doing what most everybody else does, it'd just be something nagging in the back of my mind all the time, like, you know what, that's not really true. What you said there, that advertising, whatever, that's not really true. And that's not right. So anyway, just an example. The wicked have no regard for the poor. Proverbs 29 and verse 7. The righteous considereth the cause of the poor, but the wicked regardeth not to know it. See, righteous people, whenever they see a truly poor person, they're going to consider his cause, right? The wicked are just going to turn their head and pretend like they didn't see it. They don't want to be bothered by it, and they don't want to help out. But the righteous, that's not the case. The poor and needy, along with the widow, fatherless, and stranger, are the weak and easy target for the wicked. And I'm just going to show you a slew of verses here which show that the wicked go after these types. They don't go after they don't pick on people their own size. They go after the easy ones. The bullies at school. Do the bullies at school pick on the other bullies that are their size? No. The bullies at school pick on the little kids, right? The fat kids or the short kids or the ugly kids or whatever, right? They don't pick on kids their own size. But I do love to see a big, righteous kid beat the tar out of a bully that's picking on the little guy. My brother did that one time. I didn't beat the tar out of him, but there was some kid, because my brother's a pretty husky kid, and some kid in high school was picking on some other kid that was much smaller and unpopular and not liked or whatever, and my brother slammed the kid up against the locker and, I don't know, probably told him he was going to do something horrible to him if he ever saw it again, and the problem stopped. So it is nice when you have people that will stand up for the little guy. Zechariah 7 and verse 10. Zechariah 7 and verse 10. It says, "And oppress not the widow, nor the fatherless, the stranger, nor the poor, and let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart." The Lord's warning here his people not to oppress these types. The fatherless, the orphans, right? The stranger, the immigrant that's in the land that can't speak the language or something, he's at a big disadvantage or something, and the poor. Don't oppress those types because they're the easy ones. Look at Psalm 94, 4 through 6. And you could throw in here, and I don't have this, but you could throw in the aged as well, because the aged are extremely easy to oppress because they're weak, they're feeble-minded the older they get. And how many people screw older people over the phone, telemarketers or people like that, or door-to-door salesmen, where they go and they rip off older people. That's deplorable. And I think people that do that ought to be executed or some form of punishment like that anyway. Psalm 94, 4 through 6. Says, "How long shall they utter and speak hard things, and all the workers of iniquity boast themselves? They break in pieces thy people, O Lord, and afflict thine heritage. They slay the widow and the stranger, and murder the fatherless. Yet they say, the Lord shall not see, neither shall the God of Jacob regard it." See, they're so arrogant. They pick on the little guy and then think, oh, the Lord's not going to do anything about it. Yeah, the Lord is that big dude that's going to slam you up against the locker and right the wrong. That's the Lord, and it's going to be worse than being slammed up against the locker. Look at Job 20 and verse 19. Job 20 and verse 19. And you kids remember that. Remember that, because you grow up in a Christian house, but that doesn't mean you're not immune to picking on other kids and being mean to other kids too that are younger or smaller or less fortunate than yourself. So you don't want to be the bully. That's not nice, and that really hurts people. Job chapter 20 and verse 19. "Because he hath oppressed and hath forsaken the poor, because he hath violently taken away an house which he builded not." This is the wicked. He would take away the poor guy's house that he didn't build. Like we talked about, I mean, the government does it all the time by eminent domain or something like that. And rich people that want to move in and take over an area to build a plant or something like that, they'll use their pressure tactics to hornswoggle the poor, and that's not right. Pay them a market value for it, but if they don't want to sell, then they shouldn't be forced to sell. Job 24, 1 through 10. It says, "Why, seeing times are not hidden from the Almighty, do they that know him not see his days? Some remove the landmarks. They violently take away flocks, and feed thereof. See, they move the landmarks, like the property markers. You move it over, and then you claim their land, and you can farm it and use it for yourself. That's why the scripture says, remove not the ancient landmarks. They drive away the ass of the fatherless, and they take the widow's ox for a pledge. Here's a widow, she's got no money, and they take her ox, and it doesn't say her oxen, it says her ox, meaning she probably has one. They take away her one ox for a pledge, like collateral or something, where she needs something, she's dirt poor, and they take the very means of sustenance from her instead of just helping her out when she needs it. This is what wicked people do. They exploit. They turn the needy out of the way. The poor of the earth hide themselves together. Behold, as wild asses in the desert, they go forth to their work, rising betimes for a prey. The wilderness yieldeth food for them and for their children. You wonder why the scripture refers to wicked people as beasts. It calls them beasts, calls them serpents, calls them vipers, calls them foxes. You wonder why it calls them animals? Because what do animals do? They rise early in the morning and they prey on the weak, right? Isn't that what animals do? That's what these animals do too. They prey on the weak. They reap every one his corn in the field, and they gather the vintage of the wicked. They cause the naked to lodge without clothing, that they have no covering in the cold. They are wet with the showers of the mountains, and embrace the rock for want of shelter. They pluck the fatherless from the breast, and take a pledge of the poor. They cause him to go naked without clothing, and they take away the sheaf from the hungry. Nowadays, wicked people have figured out that what you do is you band together and you call yourself a government, and then you can legally plunder people and you can tax them. And then you got old people that are on a fixed income trying to live off their savings, and then you can tax their property that they already own free and clear, and you can take that from them. And then some people actually have to sell their property to pay the taxes to the government. The government literally takes their house through taxes. It's wicked. Look at verse 14. The murderer rising with the light killeth the poor and needy, and in the night is as a thief. See, over and over again, poor and needy. Let's look at one more. Psalm 10, 2, and then 8 through 10. Psalm 10, 2, 8 through 10. The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined. And then 8 through 10, he sitteth in the lurking places of the villages. In the secret places doth he murder the innocent. His eyes are privy set against the poor. He lieth in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He lieth in wait to catch the poor. He doth catch the poor when he draweth him into his net. So there you have a whole slew of verses, and every one of them has this in common. Poor, widow, fatherless. The weak, the people that cannot stand up for themselves. And this is why the Lord says that he is a father to the fatherless and a judge of the widows. The Lord has a special place in his heart for the poor and the downtrodden, the people that cannot stand up for themselves. And if we have a heart of God, we should too. We should have compassion on those who are weak and cannot take care of themselves. You never want to take advantage of somebody because they're less fortunate than yourself. Never want to do that. The wicked are told not to rob the poor because they are poor. Proverbs 22 and verse 22. And you think about it, who do taxes really rob more? I realize that the rich, the wealthy, pay more taxes than, they pay the majority of the taxes. 20% of the people pay 80% of the taxes. And really, when you get up to the 1% of the people pay the majority of the taxes. So I realize that the rich definitely pay their fair share, and I'm certainly not saying that they should they shouldn't be taxed any more than anybody else. I mean, if you're going to tax flat percentage across the board or whatever. But when you think about it, when the government taxes, even if they tax the lower classes and the poor less, every dollar that you take from the poor, right, is making a huge impact in their life. Whereas if you tax $1,000 from a guy that makes $300,000 a year, it doesn't matter, right? When you tax $1,000 from a poor guy that makes $10,000 a year, that's huge, right? So when taxes really affect the poorest of the poor, if they pay them at all. But the tax that everybody pays is the tax of inflation. And if you think about that, that is how the government oppresses and robs the poor, because that tax is paid by everybody. Because whenever prices are going up and up and up, which is what inflation does, right? That's not what inflation is, that's what inflation does. Inflation is the increase of the money supply that causes prices to rise. That is how the government pillages the poor.
Absolutely.
The rich can afford the inflation. It doesn't bother them. Inflation goes up 5% a year, they've got enough padding, not a big deal. But the poor, it kills them.
Kills them.
And anybody that saved any money, it kills them.
Fiat currency
Yep.
is expropriation primarily from the poor.
It is.
That's
It is.
It's designed to hurt the fatherless and the widow. It's
Yes, it is.
designed to do that.
Yep.
And it kills them.
And it enriches the rich.
Totally.
And you'd think, well, what's the big inflation? It's going to hurt everybody the same, right? Prices are going to go up for everybody. No, see, the money enters the economy at some point. It enters somewhere, and where it enters, whoever gets the money first, they have the purchasing power that it currently is. But once the money gets circulated around, then the prices rise, and by the time it gets around to the poor, to the everyday guy, then his prices have already risen, and at best, it's a wash, right? Maybe his wages have risen too, hopefully, and at best, he's not helped at all, and his savings has been eviscerated, even if his income has matched up with the inflation. But the people that get it first, they're the ones, the fat cats, the big banksters that get the bailouts and the government bonds that go out to the military contractors and stuff like that. They're the people that get the money first. They're the ones that make the windfalls. And the poor are the ones that get screwed.
That is right.
You have the tax breaks.
Yes. They get it all the way around. They get the tax breaks, they get the money first, they get the contracts. That's why I tell people, don't thank me for my service, for being a veteran or something. You know, there's nothing to thank about facilitating the murder of 1 million Iraqis for the enrichment of Pentagon contractors. That's not something that I want to be thanked for. So, yeah, no need for that. And furthermore, I was just telling Seth this on the way here. If you think about it, the military, the police, these are jobs, right? We don't have a draft right now. You're not forced to go into service, right? It'd be one thing if you're a doctor and you're making buku bucks and they force you to go into the service and take a meagerly paycheck or something. Then you could say, thank you for your service, I suppose, right? But if you sign up voluntarily and you go and do a job, why thank somebody for doing a job? Nobody ever thanks me, hey, thank you for being an engineer in the past. Thank you for putting Iams dog food on the shelf, you know? Don't thank me for that. You know who thanks me for that? My employer thanked me for that when they gave me a paycheck, right?
That's right.
So there's I hate military worship. I hate all that stuff. So anyway, just so you know, I know you know, but anybody hearing this, don't thank me for my so-called service. Did we read Proverbs 22:22 yet? Don't rob the poor because he's poor. Proverbs, and I know people mean well, but I'm just letting you know, if you don't want to get a tongue lashing from me, don't thank me for it. Proverbs 22:22. Rob not the poor because he is poor, neither oppress the afflicted in the gate. Rob not the poor because he is poor. I guess you could look at that in two ways. Rob not the poor, here's the reason you don't rob him, because he's poor. Or rob not the poor for the reason that he's poor, So don't look and find a poor guy and rob him because of that. And also don't rob the guy because, hey, he's poor. Don't rob him, rob somebody else. If you're going to rob somebody, don't rob somebody that's poor. So either way, we shouldn't be robbing the poor. The government should pay attention to that verse. Wicked rulers often oppress the poor. Proverbs 28 and verse 15. Proverbs 28 and verse 15. As a roaring lion and a raging bear, so is a wicked ruler over the poor people. Roaring lions act intimidating, scare people, right? That's what rulers do, right? Taxes are not voluntary, I hate to tell you, right? When somebody puts a gun in your ribs and makes you pay, it's not voluntary. So you say, well, nobody's ever done that to me. Don't send them in once. You'll feel the gun in your ribs.
Isn't the draft voluntary? Sign up, but if you don't sign up, isn't there jail time attached to it?
I don't know for sure. That doesn't surprise me. I never had to sign up myself because I was already in when I turned 18. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly not voluntary. I mean, basically nothing the government, when they talk about voluntary compliance, there's nothing voluntary about it. Do we read, Proverbs 28:15. Did we read that one? Yeah, oh yeah, that's the one I was just talking about. Yeah, roaring lion, that's what it was. Roaring lion and a raging bear. Bears can travel like a 25-mile radius or something, and they're looking for the easy catch, like the guy's dumpster that was left open or whatever. This is what wicked people do. They either use intimidating tactics or else they just roam around and just root through anybody's stuff and take whatever they feel like. It's a wicked generation who devour the poor. Proverbs 30 and verse 14. There is a generation whose teeth are as swords and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth and the needy from among men. We're living in it. Bunch of leeches in Washington, D.C., devouring the poor from off the earth. Those that oppress the poor to increase their riches will be made poor by God. You see, they're going to reap what they sow. Proverbs 22 and verse 16. He that oppresseth the poor to increase his riches, and he that giveth to the rich shall surely come to want. And boy, doesn't this describe the American corporations, banks, and governments, right? He that oppresseth the poor to increase his riches, we already talked about with inflation, and he that giveth to the rich. So you got these lobbyists that are giving to congressmen and enriching them, and then you got the congressmen that are giving the kickbacks and giving the contracts to the rich, right? It's just this revolving door, and between Goldman Sachs, the Federal Reserve, and the Treasury Department, big old revolving door, rich giving to the rich.
Isn't that what our corporations did when they went over to China to exploit the poor people over there for their pay?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you want to look at it, because they didn't as far as I know, nobody ever forced them to work in the factories. So if the Chinese people were working in the factories voluntarily, that means that it was a better option than working in the rice paddies, right? Because if they were better off in the rice paddies, they wouldn't have went to the corporations. So it depends. I mean, I don't think that was exploitation as long as it was voluntary, and as far as I know, it was voluntary. It was a way to increase their standard of living, even though working in the sweatshops certainly is not desirable, but it beats the rice paddies, apparently, or they would have stayed in the rice paddies. So sometimes I think the best thing that could happen to some really poor countries in Africa and places is if corporations would go in there and build factories and give the people jobs. That it would. It's certainly sending foreign aid to them. It hasn't helped any, and it's probably not going to. But if you're exploiting people, in whatever way, promising them something and you don't give it to them, or withholding wages or something like that, then that's a different story. But as long as it's totally voluntary and whatever contracts were agreed to are kept, then I don't have an issue with that. My dad always he hates the coal companies, and back in this country in the 1800s or so, and even early 1900s, that they had the factory store or the company stores and so on. But the thing is, people worked for those coal companies for a reason, right? Apparently it beat being out there working in the field or something, being a tenant farmer for somebody, or there's some reason why they worked in those things. They weren't held captive there. So to condemn the only company that will give you a job is probably not a good thing, right?
Sometimes the rich people can change natural environmental circumstances and force people into clusters and then say, well, now your only choice is that looks appealing.
Yeah.
So the American farmer owning the land and so forth gets maneuvered, and now they take a city job.
They set the prices on
And they set the prices on the corn, the wheat, or the rice paddy stuff.
Yeah, and if that's right, and if prices are set or artificially low, like the government does for stuff, yeah, and you can't afford to farm or something, that's a different story, yeah. So, but under just a pure free market, if a corporation offers you a job, and even though the working conditions are, by our standards, horrible, if it's better than the rice paddy, then we can't fault them for giving them a better option or something. And as economic progress happens, the same thing happened in this country, right? People worked in horrible conditions for a long time, worked 7-hour days, 16-hour days, and their kids worked and everything else. And it wasn't because, they wanted to, it's because they had to. But once industrialization took off, and then capital accumulation happens, and then the worker can be more productive because he's operating a machine that can produce 100 widgets to every one widget that he could with his hands, then you have a rise in the standard of living. And then once you have a rise in the standard of living and you produce more of the things that people need to live, once there's a higher supply of those things, then the price of them naturally goes down. And when the price goes down and you're more productive, then your money goes further, and then eventually you don't have to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can work a 40-hour week. But it's only until you get that increased production due to capital accumulation. And didn't mean to just go into an economics lecture, but
it's strange the Pilgrims came over, though, and there's so much land that's arable in America, the breadbasket of the world, so easy to grow food. And even though they worked hard as a family and a community, and they took it and prospered from it. And then the Industrial Revolution comes, and you find people with their kids working 16 hours in sweatshops in the north, and all this land's unoccupied.
Well, but I mean, the Pilgrims, though, it wasn't like they came over here and they were working 8 hours a day and taking the weekends off. I mean, they were working.
But they worked as a family.
Yeah.
They grew food for them.
But they all, half of them starved to death the first year, too. So, yeah, so, I mean, it sounds all romantic and everything. It'd be wonderful to live off the land and farm or whatever, but reality's quite different, right? So, I'd say we're better off now. Well, all the social stuff and all that, but as far as just the Industrial Revolution goes, and the standard of living that we have now is preferable to being out there toiling in the field with your bare hands, I suppose. Don't get me you get me going on economics and I could go all day. All right, let's see, where was I? Did we do Proverbs 22:16? I totally forgot. Oh yeah, yeah, they'll surely come to want. So yeah, here's what's going to happen to these revolving doors between corporations, banks, and governments. They're going to come to want eventually. They're going to get what's coming to them, and I look forward to that day. It's especially injurious and insulting when a poor man oppresses another poor man. It's bad enough whenever a rich man, but when you got a poor guy oppressing a poor guy, and really, I mean, this happens all the time, you think about it, because don't the voting blocks that vote for the guys that give the handouts, right? It's like the poor oppressing the poor. They're voting for more handouts to screw themselves and their neighbors, and they don't even realize it. Proverbs 28 and verse 3. It says, a poor man that oppresseth the poor is like a sweeping rain, which leaveth no food. governments begin to fail, democratic style governments begin to fail whenever people realize that they can vote themselves a raise, right? And we're long past that phase. That's why we're in such a mess. Okay, the other group of people that the wicked persecute are the righteous, the upright in conversation. Or the upright, how does it say it there? The such as be of upright conversation. Upright is, when we're speaking figuratively of persons, it is adhering to or following correct moral principles of unbending integrity or rectitude, morally just, honest, or honorable, of the mind, qualities, actions, etc., marked or characterized by integrity or probity, having conformity or accordance with moral rectitude. So an upright person, I like that what it says there, he is has unbending integrity and rectitude. So he will do the right thing no matter what. No matter if it costs him, whatever the cost is, he will always stick true to his principles. That is an upright man. And those happen to be the people that the wicked hate the most. The people that will not bend, those are the ones that get persecuted. A conversation, it says those are of upright conversation. The conversation is the action of living or having one's being in a place or among persons, also figuratively one's spiritual being. So an upright conversation is an upright way of life. It is the way in which a person lives with moral integrity. Now the just, that is the upright, are an abomination to the wicked. Just like we hate the wicked, right? We see wicked people doing wicked things, and we hate that, right? It disgusts us. We hear about the pedophile rings in Hollywood. By the way, these are finally getting exposed, and I hope they do. Corey Feldman, I think is the guy's name. He was the child actor back in the 80s. He's been all over the news recently exposing them. He just filed a lawsuit with the LAPD. I don't know if hopefully it goes somewhere. Hopefully he doesn't get killed and it doesn't get swept under the rug. But anyway, we see people like that, pedophiles in Hollywood, and we are disgusted and repulsed by people like that. But you know what? People like that see people like us, and they're just as repulsed by us as we are by them. Proverbs 29 and verse 27. Proverbs 29 and verse 27. It says, an unjust man is an abomination to the just. That's what I just described. And he that is upright in the way is abomination to the wicked. Abomination means a combined feeling of disgust and hatred. The wicked people, when they see a Christian that is standing on his principles and that will not bend and that will not back down, right? They hate you for it. I had friends like that when I was in college, whenever I stopped getting drunk. And it's like, I don't know if I'd say they hated me and I was an abomination to them, but boy, they sure tried to pressure me to change my mind and make fun of you and whatever else. They don't like that. Whenever you stop doing what they're doing and you won't go along with it, and it exposes them and the darkness in their heart, they hate you for it. He that is upright in the way is an abomination to the wicked. And they won't stop until they force you to say whatever they want you to say. That's what all this stuff comes down to. All this transgender crap today that people's lives and careers are being destroyed for, they want you, even if those people down in their hearts probably know this stuff's all bunk anyway and it's ridiculous, they have found something that they can try to make us say and make us go along with so that they can just have power over us. It's sick. The poor man, who is an upright man, is especially odious to the wicked. So when you get the combination of the poor guy with integrity, then they really hate you. I just got a couple of verses here that talk about the poor that have integrity. Proverbs 19 and verse 1. Better is the poor that walketh in his integrity than he that is perverse in his lips and is a fool. You know why they really hate the poor with integrity? Because he shows that they have all the advantage in this world and yet they're still wicked. It's like a double whammy. Proverbs 28 and verse 6. I mean, you see a poor guy, and he could just go along to get along, and yet he says, no, I'm not going to do whatever you tell me to do. Like the Christians in the Roman Empire. I'm not going to do it. Right? I'm not going to bow down to Caesar. I don't care. And they hated those people for that. Because they just wouldn't do what they wanted them to do. Proverbs 28 and verse 6. Better is the poor that walketh in his uprightness than he that is perverse in his ways, though he be rich. Now the wicked focus their persecutions on the righteous. And this has happened throughout history. I was just thinking about this. Antiochus Epiphanes, whenever he was a Greek, one of the leaders of the Greeks, and he went to war with the Ptolemies in Egypt. And then on the way back from the war, he passes through Israel on his way back to Syria, and he just goes in there and just pillages the place, murders like 80,000 people, takes another 40,000 people captive, just because he can, just because they're weak little Jews, people of God or whatever, and they love to persecute and ruin the righteous. And you got many other examples of this too. Like I said, in Rome and with the early Christians. And instead of just leaving those poor people alone, what are they hurting? They're not hurting anybody. They just won't burn incense to Caesar. They won't bow down to Caesar as a god, and they have to be persecuted. The Roman Catholic Church in the Inquisition, same thing. You know, these poor Christians who aren't bothering anybody, they're holed up in the mountains, not harming a soul, and those are the ones that they persecute. This is what wicked people do. They focus their persecution on the righteous. James tells us that there were evil rich men there that he was condemning who would kill the just, and these just didn't even resist them. James 5 and verse 6 says, "Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you." That's why they go after him. They're righteous, and they're not going to put up a resistance. They're not going to fight back. Psalm 11:2 tells us that the wicked will target the upright. I just got a couple more verses for you, and we'll be done tonight. Psalm 11 and verse 2. For lo, the wicked bend their bow, they make ready their arrow upon the string, that they may privily shoot at the upright in heart. They're not out there killing their other wicked friends. They're out there going after the righteous. And remember what it says in Proverbs 6 and verse 26? This goes for wicked women too. They don't go primarily after the wicked men to try to get them. They go after the righteous, after the precious life. It's like a jewel, a gem in her crown if she can get a good man to succumb to her ways. Proverbs 6 and verse 26. For by means of a whorish woman a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. She goes after the godly man to see if she can get the prize. Now, I don't want you to go away tonight feeling discouraged, right? Don't be discouraged, because this is the way it's always been. The wicked have always gone after the righteous. Remember, though, the Lord will see. He sees it from heaven. He laughs at them. He has them in derision. He sees that their day is coming. And let this invigorate you. It invigorates me, the idea of being a righteous person who is being persecuted for righteousness. It excites me. And I hope it will excite you too. Don't let it discourage you. Don't be despondent and depressed about it. But just take it as a challenge and be thankful that we live in a time when we can suffer for Christ. Next time we'll pick up with verse 15, Lord willing.